MUN Summit 2023. My name is Tariq, and I'm the Deputy Director of MUNers Across Borders. And today, in this very panel, we're going to be discussing what makes a good Secretary General with three very interesting, very distinctive speakers from different MUN societies across the world. Before I go ahead and introduce my speakers, I'd like to just remind everyone who are watching us that throughout the panel, you may leave your questions both in the chat or the Q&A, which you could see on the right side of your screens. And as we approach the end of our session, we might as well invite some of you on the stage if you'd like to directly address the question to our distinctive speakers. So feel free to put your questions. If you'd like to be invited on the stage, please raise your hand. We're going to do it at the very end. And yeah, in the meantime, I'm going to be keeping an eye on all the questions, which I can then address to our speakers at the very end. Once again, thanks for joining us and welcome to MUN Summit 2023. So today I'm having three Secretary Generals with me. First and foremost, we have Shahad Ashraf, who's joining us from Egypt. Shahad is a 20-year-old microbiology student who's doing her undergrad at Suez Canal University in Ismailia, Egypt. After a year at Suez Canal University Model United Nations Society as a delegate, she is now the Secretary General of SCU MUN, who's also a partner of MUNers Across Borders. So thanks for joining us, Shahad. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very glad I'm here.
We're glad to have you here as well. Next up, we have Jonas Simorankir. Jonas is a biology student ending his bachelor's studies at University of Bonn in Germany. Jonas is currently the Secretary General of MUNusal, which is in Salamanca, Spain, and it will be taking place in April this year, actually in April 2023. Jonas, thanks for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here as well.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And finally, we have Rike, who's an undergrad student pursuing her degree in International Relations and Law at University of Erfurt in Germany. In 2021, she joined MUN as a delegate. In 2022, she had her first National Model United Nations in New York and in Japan later that year. And this year, in 2023, she is the Secretary General of MUN Germany, which again is happening at her home university at University of Erfurt. Rike, thank you for joining us as well. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Great. After these very interesting introductions, I don't want to be speaking too long. I know our guests and our attendees here are also here to listen to you, not to myself. So I'm just going to go ahead and start with some generalized questions, and then we'll go more specific as the conversation moves on. So most of you, if not all of you, have had prior experiences as chairs, as delegates. I'm assuming some secretariat roles as well. So how do you think those experiences previously influence your role as the Secretary General of your respective societies? I'm gonna leave the floor to our panelists. I don't know if any of you would like to go first. Shad, would you like to go first?
Sure, yeah. Well, I think in general, any Secretary General must have at least some form of previous experience. I don't think it would be a really good idea to just go directly into the position of Secretary General. And I think being a delegate first, so the lowest rank, being a delegate first, it just gives you this insight into what MUN is. It kind of, I don't know, originates the passion for MUN. And then you go on from there and maybe move up the hierarchy and you realize how much you love this place and how much you want to give back. And you know how things work on a lower level. And I think that helps regulate things when you move up the ranks. So I think people usually need a better understanding, an in-depth understanding of what it is like to experience MUN, what it's like to attend a conference, and what people like and don't like. So when you are in charge of an MUN conference or an activity or whatever else, you know exactly what the people want because you were once in their place. And I think that mostly shapes what it's like to transition from a delegate or a chair or anything else into becoming a Secretary General.
Totally agreed. I mean, it just makes it so much easier for you to basically put yourself in their shoes. Ricky or Jonas, would any of you like to add on top of some of these, maybe?
I don't know whether Rico would like to go first, but you want to go first? Oh, all right. Well, then I just go. And so yeah, just basically, just like what Shad said, I believe that it's quite important when you are a Secretary General for you to understand the different roles, especially the roles of those being delegates or journalists or chairs, and you can only understand the problems that they face during the conference if you have served in those roles previously before. I believe that it also allows a lot of trust from your own team. That you understand what they are going through. And if you are jumping into the position of a Secretary General without understanding what specific roles within your team, within your secretariat entail, then you are not really the best fit in order to coordinate between each role within your team. So, of course, I believe that influences it to a massive extent the amount of experience that you have before, and not only as a delegate or as a chair, but even a more multifaceted role, so a higher variety of roles. I think it's very important to understand how the whole picture works at the end of the day.
Definitely. And Enrique, I think you had a point there to add as well.
Yeah, I obviously agree with what they both said before, but I wanted to add to that for me personally, my experience as a delegate and then later as a tutor in our seminar definitely helped me to grow personally, to like work on my communication skills. I learned how to stay very diplomatic, and obviously, like public speaking is a thing that you practice a lot when you are a delegate yourself, and that will help you when you then become a Secretary General. Similar to, for example, timing is something that's always a big discussion in our seminar, and you learn how to like organize yourself and like stick to the schedules and very important life lessons like that. And I also think like the most important thing I took away is that like in order to move forward, you need to leave your comfort zone. And I learned how to do that as a delegate. And if I hadn't learned that before, I think I would not have taken on the role as Secretary General, because it is and it was outside of my comfort zone. So I needed this lesson as a delegate first in order to then accept the role of Secretary General and like willingly choose the uncomfortable path.
Totally agreed. Totally agreed, because it's actually, I think, being a delegate for a lot of the people who actually teaches you that lesson of nothing is gonna, come as long as you stay within that comfort zone. So totally agree with that last point. So taking from that, actually, some of the points that you mentioned, as a Secretary General, as some of you already mentioned, usually, if not all the time, you are expected to form your own secretariats or your own board, your own organizing committee. The names just differ from part of the world. So what are some of the qualities that you look as the leaders of your society when recruiting new members to your own secretariats or to your own boards, so to say? That is, of course, if you had to do it, but I'm assuming most of you had to do it. So I wanna touch a little bit on that and then see what do you think are some of those qualities that you're looking for in your new fellow members. Any of you can go first. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, I'll go first.
Shad, you can go ahead.
Well, I had to choose from people that I haven't had personal, interactions with. Since we're distributed among councils, I didn't really know most of my board, but I did attend their interviews. And what I realized I wanted from the start, and I still believe is one of the main things that I want in a secretariat, I want them to be cooperative. People who are cooperative just make things so much easier. You don't want someone who is trying to prove a point or someone who's trying to do good for themselves. You want someone that actually cares about the delegates' experience more than their own. Not in a selfless way, but actually to I want someone that can let things go. We realize that we're in a disagreement or there's some form of dispute. We pick the option that suits the general delegates' experience better, more than something that would suit your personal satisfaction. And I think that's very hard to do, because obviously we're mostly students. All of us, at least in Suez Canal, are students. So you wouldn't want them to actually you wouldn't want as a student yourself to be at a disadvantage. But when it comes to a leadership position, even if it's in an NGO or any place that's not the normal definition of work, you still have to make some sacrifices. So that's what I usually need from a secretariat: someone who can make sacrifices and someone who can cooperate with me for a shared goal in a way.
Exactly, and to achieve that bigger goal, a goal that's bigger than the pieces of each and every one of that members, but that's worthy for the delegates to actually be attending. Totally agree with that, with you on that, Shad. Would either one of you would like to add on that point, or?
Yeah, I would actually like to add to that. I mean, I obviously agree with that. I think it's a very important point that you made. And my faculty advisor had a very interesting turn on that, and I think I took that from her, and I agree with her in that. And she said that for her, motivation is the most important thing, and I think that goes with what Shah had said before, because she says like everything else can be taught, like all the practical skills that you need, they can be learned, but you cannot learn to have this deep motivation and this deep understanding of what this project does for people, and why it is so important to, as Shahad said, like sacrifice something for it. Yes.
Definitely, and when you think about it, most MUNs are volunteer societies anyway, so motivation has to be there. I'm sorry, Jonas, please.
No. Yes. No, I completely agree with Rika as well, and that is actually the main thing, because I believe that throughout all the conferences I've ever been through, there are many secretaries general, or there are many conferences which prefer to put experience above everything. But I do not believe that experience is the main thing. At the end of the day, all of us are students. All of us are learning through every step of the way, regardless of whether or not we're a delegate or a secretary general. What you believe in is this motivation. And I believe that the most important thing to get that motivation is this incentive of whether or not you believe in what you are doing. And I think that's the most important thing. You do not want people who just want to be there, and to be quite frank about it, just to put another notch on in their CV. In order to be able to say, okay, well, this is another conference I've done. Okay, I've done 10 different conferences, 20 different conferences. Well, that doesn't really matter if you do not believe in what you are doing as a team. And those people in the end will also be the people who cooperate the most, because they want to, realize the vision that you have together. And I think that is what I always look for the most, is whether or not I trust that this person shares the same ideas and the same vision of the conference as I do.
Totally agree. It's sort of like a puzzle, actually, because when you think about all the qualities that you're pointing, like what Shad said about cooperation, and then for you to be able to cooperate, you need to be able to have the motivation, like Rika said. So it's almost like a puzzle where you need all those qualities so that it matches perfectly, and then that forms an ideal secretariat which can communicate with each other effectively. Really interesting points. Thank you all. As we move on, once again, I'd like to remind our audience that at any point you can still raise questions through the chat, which you can see on the right side of your screen, or the Q&A function again. We're going to collect those questions and then we're going to address them at the very end. Or if you'd like to address them personally, I'd be happy to invite you on stage at the very end. So going back to some of those qualities, Secretary Generals, and as a Secretary General once myself, I know do a lot of work. You communicate with your own secretariat. You find external sponsors or partners. Again, that depends on the roles you have within the team, but you're somewhat involved in that process as well. And in some cases, even undertake the role of like a mentor or a tutor. So looking back at your experiences so far, at least, what was the one thing that you found to be particularly challenging or difficult, or this one, I guess, situation which you may have found to be especially, difficult to overcome, if any of you had such an instance, of course. Did any of you have such an instance?
Yeah.
You can go ahead, Shad. Oh, sorry. Either one is fine.
Sorry, I thought I would let you relax for a moment, but if you want to start, you can start, Shad.
No, you should totally start.
Okay, because for me, I enjoy everything that is like face to face, and like talking to them, getting to know people. I have no problem with working with them in any kind of way. But what stresses me the most, and I think it's very typical for our generation, is phone calls. Like I have to get over myself every time I do it, and like from the outside, I pretend that it doesn't bother me, but it deeply stresses me out. And I think it's a fear that I'm facing, like many times during my time as a Secretary General, so it's a good learning opportunity for me. And what I think goes with that is also emailing, because I think when you just read like a strict email, I always think that, like, I'm always worried that everyone is so mad at me because I don't understand the context, you can't see the faces. And so I really had to make an effort to understand that I can just write an email and it's not going to be rude. Like, I don't have to apologize 20 times when I write an email. It's okay if I just get it out there and like put my opinion forward. And also I needed to learn how to trust in my writing skills, because I wanted 10 people to approve this email, but in the end, they are not going to care if it's going to be word A or word B, if the content of the email is the right thing. So I had to learn how to communicate when not.
Great, because it will be a part of it, especially with all those online conferences that we had been doing since 2020. We all had to develop those skills, whether we like them or not. So I totally feel you on what you said, especially regarding the emails. Shad, please.
Honestly, it's the same point as her. I hate coming off as rude. So it was such a challenge for me to start giving out tasks or reminders or setting up meetings. As we all know, we're all students, and you know that people are busy, and you know that this is some sort of volunteer work, that no one has to do this. So I just felt there's pressure on me, that I'm constantly being the person who puts pressure on people. Even though we all signed up for this ourselves, it still felt like I was coming off as rude sometimes. I hated coming off as, I don't know, bossy in a way. So giving out tasks or picking a time for a meeting, that was something very difficult for me. I hated coming off as rude. And on the other hand, something early on, before I even got to know my board, was trying to visualize this plan for the season, because we don't have a single conference. It's throughout the season. So coming up with a plan for this season was very difficult, because I don't know if we all agree on it. And if I don't know if we all have the same vision. So picking a vision that suits everyone and that make, as you previously said, motivation, that keeps that motivation in place. So I felt like I could mess up. I could set up a plan that would make them lose their motivation or make them lose their interest in being part of the board. And that scared me so much. And it happens along the season that we have disputes and that we feel the plan isn't suitable for a person or two. But it worked. It worked out in the end.
I'm really glad it did, and it usually does. It's just a matter of handling that process effectively. Jonas, please.
Yeah. So just to also a little bit similar to what Chad said, I believe that, and also related to the previous question, actually, is the main difficulty, I believe, for me, because I started MUN in university before Corona started, and now I'm basically ending it up after, like in the reawakening of the Corona period. And so basically, for me, it's ensuring that this MUN spirit stay alive and ensuring that everyone has the same vision in the teams that I have worked for in different conferences. And I believe that is massively challenging. And I think this is a challenge currently as well, which is why platforms such as MUNers Across Borders is very, very important to keep all this network and all this knowledge flow continuing even after the pandemic. I believe that the pandemic really made it very difficult, not only in terms of finding delegates, in terms of finding people who are interested, but also in terms of finding sponsorship, in terms of ensuring that the finances are able to survive until the end. It was a very difficult economic situation, very difficult logistic situation. Switching online did help people who may not have the same facilities or the same privileges as those of us to be able to attend many more conferences than they would usually. However, at the same time, it also creates challenges of keeping people interested and fighting things such as Zoom fatigue and continuing to have to come up with innovative ideas and with new concepts in order to keep people interested, in order to keep MUNing alive. I think that was a massive challenge throughout the past 3 years. And I think we survived as an MUNing community the whole Corona season, alive and well, as we can see today. But I think it was very, very difficult for all of us involved, especially in leadership positions throughout all those times.
Definitely. We survived, alive, well, energetic, and in the mood to celebrate as we're doing right now with the MUN summit. So totally agreed with you on that. It was an interesting period to witness, but we're here. We're back in a lot of the MUN in-person MUN conferences. So it's really nice to be back. And I'm gonna take on one of those last points of yours concerning how platforms like this one, MUNers Across Borders, or like the World Model UNA celebrations, basically contribute. You are all Secretary General from different parts of the world, and I think you might have certain different visions when it comes to MUN or the role it plays in bringing people together as well. So I want to ask each of you, in what capacity do you think the World Model UNA platform or events like this, the MUN Summit, contributes to the celebration, the appreciation, I would say, of the MUN activity generally all over the world? You could give examples from your own region. You could give examples from other places that you may heard of. But I want to see how this is being perceived in different parts of the world, basically. Shad, I see you were about to say, I think.
Yeah. Well, considering our MUN is in Egypt, and yeah, MUN in Egypt is not very famous. It's not a popular student activity. It's not found in different schools or different colleges. It's not that common. So the thing with World MUN Day was when I told them about it, I just felt like it was this method or way of introducing them to the fact that MUN is not an idea confined to our university. It's all over the world, and there are so many people, much more than they could even imagine, participating in different MUNs. And even though we're not all connected in some form of organization, we're still very connected in terms of being a community and in terms of having a shared experience. And I felt like when I first introduced my delegates to this partnership and I told them about the event and the summit, that I was introducing them to the fact that they were part of something bigger than what we are, as just a simple student activity in a rather small university in a rather small city in Africa. So I just felt like it's giving them this wider view into what MUN is and what it could offer them. It could offer them a community across borders and in different continents and different countries, and it just shows how great of a thing MUN is and how much more they should appreciate it and appreciate being a part of it. So yeah, that's it.
A community across borders is a phrase that I really like, that I might as well propose this to our organizing committee to see if we can put it on the website. Like when you just enter World Model on the website, it's like a community across borders. Matches our vision very well. So thanks for that point. Rico or Jonas, would you like to add on top of that?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, I can go first, I guess. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I believe it's a great platform for knowledge sharing. I think that is the main point as well. Is that as Shad has said, we all come from different regions. We all come from different cultures, and also because MUNing is actually such a global thing that so many different universities, different educational institutions do it all over the world. You are actually surprised at how different it is being done throughout the globe. And it is even surprising sometimes when I go to different conferences in Germany and I talk to the organizers there and see how different they do it than, like with the association I started with, which is BMUN here in Bonn. And I believe that at the end of the day, we can only improve on all our different conferences by taking ideas from each other, by sharing all of the great ideas that we have from each other. I believe that one of the key aspects, for example, that I love about MUNing is crisis. I'm a big fan of crisis committees and all the different types of MUN crises. And it is very noticeable how different conferences are by the way they do crises. And if you come to a different conference and you see it, you try to adopt that idea, and they come to your conference and they see how you do it. They try to adopt different key aspects of how you do crisis. That, for example, is is one of the knowledges that you get just from talking to each other. But sometimes, because of logistical reasons, because of time reasons, because of financial reasons, you cannot just go to all these conferences around the world. And that's why this platform is very important, because it allows people to just assemble, to talk to each other, to discuss like we are doing right now, to raise questions to each other, and to see things from a different perspective on how we each other can improve our own conferences.
And the way we do things, definitely agreed with you on that. And then as a person who chaired UNSC committees more than any other committees in MUN, probably I'm kind of on the same page with you when it comes to crises. But yeah, I feel you on that. Rika, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with what Jonas said about how inspirational it is to see how other people do basically the same activity. Because I think although we may find differences that we can learn from, at the baseline we all have like the same vision, and we believe in the same values. So I think that is like a very inspirational thing to see, and I think it also goes together with what Shahad said about this community across borders, that it is in fact those same values that unite us all. Like no matter where on the world you do those conferences, there are people out there who believe in the values of the United Nations, and they believe in the importance of the lessons that Model UN can teach you. And I think events like these are necessary to see that it exists, and that we have this young inspirational generation that is learning from those experiences.
Exactly, from those experiences and from the experiences of each other through platforms like this, which is just a wonderful, I see as a learning process that I think a lot of some of the previous generations at least did not have as much as we do today. So definitely agree with you on that. Now we're going to switch a bit more towards, I'd say, some personal questions before we get into some of the questions from our audience, because we already have one. What is the one thing that you believe contributed most to your personal development? Doesn't necessarily have to be your academic life, but more so your personal development while undertaking all these responsibilities, while serving basically as the leaders of your respective societies, basically. You could come up with a keyword, you could come up with a memory that you think really contributed to your personal development, but I'd be really, really interested to hear that. You can go ahead, Shad.
Okay. Well, one of the most important things that I've learned so far from my experience as a SecGen, and something that I know will contribute so much to my personality, not only academically, but in my life in general, was the fact that this is somewhat my first leadership position. And I realized as a person who I don't know if, I think it's a very common concept, imposter syndrome. I suffered so much with imposter syndrome that whatever I succeeded in, whatever I tried to achieve, that I would never consider it a true achievement. And this is what brings me back to the struggle I talked about, is coming off as rude if I have to ask people for something, or thinking so much about my words before I type them or say them, in case someone thinks I'm being too bossy or annoying or whatever. My experience as a SecGen just made me realize that sometimes you're in this position and you're there because you're qualified, and you're there because you got there with your own effort and with your own experience. And what I gained was I have this confidence, and I did not have that before I started this position. I have this confidence in my ability to make a decision. And that helped me, that sometimes you have to make decisions that not everyone will like, decisions that may not suit everyone's time or schedule, and you have to make them. You have to make those decisions. And that just, it rubbed off in my personal life, making decisions that I know will not make everyone happy, but there are things that I have to do. And I think that just, it aided my personal development as a person so much that I have this capacity to trust myself and trust my judgment. And yeah, that's it, among others, of course, but this is something that really struck me the past month. I realized that this affected me so much.
And it's something that you're definitely going to be carrying with you, to the future with you in your professional career as well, which is, again, another amazing aspect of MUN or these roles that you undertake, which in turn develops your soft skills that are going to then stay with you in your professional life. So totally agree with you. Would Rika or Jonas would like to continue?
Yeah, I think what Shahad said was very, very important, and very, it made me think about my answer too, because initially I thought for me, I talked about it before, and I was going to come back to it, like to leaving your comfort zone. And I think what it comes down to is similar to what you said. So for me, it was this like actively knowing, okay, the next step is going to be like a little bit out of my comfort zone. So I'm actively choosing to leave this comfortable position and to face this fear of mine. But I also have to say, like, for me, sometimes you need a little push to leave your comfort zone. So it's very important to have a good team that believes in you and that helps you take this step if you need a little extra motivation to take this step. Yeah, I just wanted to add that to that, but I think Shad's answer was very, very important and very good.
Definitely. Jonas, please.
Yeah, so I think what I learned the most is also follow through. I mean, I also learned a lot on what Shad and Rika have mentioned, but I believe that at the end of the day, when you are in the Secretary General position and you are, so to say, the number one of that conference, at the end of the day, everyone turns to you for, like Shad says, the difficult decisions and for you to be able to realize the conference in order for everything to be a success. You are, at the end of the day, the one responsible. Everyone wants to become the leader, but as they say, heavy is the head that wears the crown. And at the end of the day, it's this pressure, and you are entitled to things as a secretary general. But at the end of the day, you are also obliged to be able to follow through. And the success of that conference or the failure of that conference depends on your decision making as well. And it is all good and well that you are able to talk and you are able to undertake rhetorics and you are able to do the speeches at the opening or at the closing ceremonies, whatever you. But at the end of the day, is this follow through, supporting your team, making sure that the rules of procedure are working well, making sure that all the logistics are being run, smoothly. At the end of the day, it's sacrificing, as Shad has said as an answer to the first question, sacrificing your own personal interests as well in order to make sure that the conference is followed through at the end of the day. And I think that was a big lesson, and it's also still a lesson that I learned every day as well. That one has to put aside all of one's personal interests, and one has to be able to realize, one has to work hard and sacrifice many things in order to realize the vision that they have.
Totally agree with you. I mean, getting that vision all across the team is a responsibility, and it's a skill that a lot of us will need in the future as well, regardless of us staying in some of these positions that are more associated with MUN or doing something completely different. It is a skill that's essential and that will be very useful, definitely in the future. So now, before we come to our audience questions, we're going to have some speaker-targeted, speaker-specific questions, so to say. And I'm going to address one question to each of you, and to hear insight more so on that specific topic. So starting with Shad. Shad, I know you started MUN quite early in middle school, which was fascinating for me because even for debate, not even MUN, but debating, I did it in high school, MUN in university. So you started way before most of us even were aware of the existence of MUN, and became the Secretary General of your society only after a year of doing MUN at university. So tell me a little bit about the work that you're all doing at SCU MUN, which I know involves training your members, developing their skills, doing, I think, weekly sessions as well, and how this affects the community at your university, or those people who are participating at least.
Okay, well, I didn't specifically start MUN in middle school, but I was first introduced by my English teacher, who I owe the world to now, to debating, and it was quite the experience. And since then, I grew more and more attached to the idea of debating. And in my first year of university, one of my friends told me that there is an MUN, and I was, I think, maybe the only person in my last season as a delegate who knew what MUN was before joining it, and that is one thing that I can say leads me to the experience of MUN in general in SCU. As you said, we do weekly sessions, which is not really the usual. We don't have a conference per year or something where delegates of Egypt come together. It's more of a it's more confined to Suez Canal University. We have 3 councils: ECOSOC, Human Rights, and Security. And in those councils, they discuss the appropriate things regarding the topics. And we have not the biggest number of members, but a good amount of members where each person will actually come out of this experience with a new skill, or with an improvement in their soft skills in general. So what we target, or what we hope happens when someone joins MUN in Suez Canal University, is that they can leave the season or continue to a different position or a different council or whatever they choose to do. We want them to end the season a person with better soft skills, presentation skills, research skills, and something that I know isn't very common, but English language. Since our sessions are done in English, it's not an absolute must then that all of our delegates have joined us being completely fluent or knowing how to formulate their attacks or defenses or even writing an introduction. I've seen growth in people who were peers as delegates, and people who I can see now from my position as a Secretary General, who grew as a speaker and a writer and so much more in English. And that just makes me so proud of what we do and what my board does, whether presidents or rapporteurs. I'm very proud of them for affecting the delegates' soft skills and skills in general in that way. And I think that's why it's so different with us. We do weekly sessions because you need to work on their skills much more than you would need to work on the skills of a person whose native language is English, or someone that has previous experience with debating or previous experience with even research. Most of our delegates are second-year students, meaning they're around 19, 20, and they're very inexperienced with the idea of research, especially political topics and fact-checking and all that. So I love the fact that they leave the season knowing so much more than they had joining us. And that's our general experience in SCU.
Which is amazing, to say the least, because it then gives you this sense of a bigger purpose, that you're not just doing this to bring people for a conference over the weekend, but you're literally influencing people's lives, possibly preparing them, usually preparing them for conferences that they're going to attend all over the world in the future. So it's just such a different and educational, I would say, way of doing MUN, teaching MUN, which I just respect so much. So thank you to you and to your board as well for doing that. I'll move on with Jonas. Jonas, you're majoring in biology. And with all due respect, not that I'm agreeing with this, but I'm just saying it's just like a general statement that it's a field not traditionally associated with MUN yet, at least. But you've been undertaking all these different roles in different conferences all across Europe. I mean, you're literally studying in Germany, and you've been assigned to become the Secretary General of a conference in Spain, which is very, very impressive. And then you're basically sparing your energy, your time, your money. So what's the motivation behind this, basically? And do you think should people with similar backgrounds, or I could generalize this by saying more like with STEM backgrounds, be more active in joining these kinds of activities? I want to hear your insight on that.
Right. Yes, I mean, do not worry. Every conference I attend, this question is raised by someone, usually already by the time the opening ceremony opens, and right after at the reception, there's usually always one person who comes up with this question. So yes, it is not a field that is generally associated with MUNing, of course. But at the end of the day, my motivation behind it is, well, as Shad, as Rika have said, and I've elaborated multiple times, there's just so much that you learn in terms of personal skills, in terms of soft skills, that are not necessarily only exclusively needed in the world of international diplomacy or in the world of politics or policy making, but generally, regardless of what you do, whether or not you're in the STEM sciences, whether or not you're in social sciences, things such as communication, such as presentation skills, such as public speaking skills, those are just needed all throughout and something that everyone can improve on. The motivation behind is, of course, to learn different countries, different cultures, different political backgrounds. So just to get to know as many new people as possible on top of learning all these new skills. It's always one of the big advantages of MUNing. Also, just to meet students from all different backgrounds, because there are also people from, I've met people from theology, from literature, from all different fields that are also not only STEM fields, but on other fields that are not stereotypically associated with the world of MUNing. And I do think that students from the STEM sciences do need to participate in MUNs, or not need to, but they should participate in MUNing. I think that Shah would agree. I think that you're also microbiology students. So yeah, of course, at the end of the day, I feel like there is sometimes this slight, I wouldn't say animosity, but there's this line between social sciences and natural sciences. It is so noticeable in the MUNing world, where there's this exclusivity, where there are the STEM students who look at me sometimes, my own classmates, and say, "Oh, well, Jonas, what are you doing there with the political science nerds? Like that's not your field. What are you doing there?" And then there's the political science students, or social science students, who come to me like, "Well, you're kind of weird. Like, why are you here?" But you need both sides. I mean, a lot of natural scientists, they become really smart at their fields. They are so good at their fields, but they lack this humanitarian approach. They lack this understanding of how their work, their technical work, impacts the society and other people. They don't understand it. They've never practiced it. They've never looked at a position paper or tried to formulate, a policy. Like, they don't associate that with policy making. Meanwhile, you also have, of course, a lot of more technical communities being simulated in MUNs, where people are not taking into context or taking into consideration the technical information that the STEM students can provide. So it's all about exchange of information, and I think that generally MUNing is for everyone. Of course, the whole facet of it is mostly international diplomacy and politics, but it is an opportunity for everyone to learn and for us to improve as a generation as well. So that's that.
Which is just a fascinating point to make, because as someone who also started doing MUN in a similar format as Shad actually explained, in like a weekly session format back in my university, where we'd have bachelor's, master's, and PhD students sitting in the same room discussing the same topic, spanning across different ages, of course, but bringing so many different insights around the same table in the same room is actually indeed quite interesting. And it's actually necessary, like the way you put it, Jonas, towards the end of your speech. It's actually necessary, but we just sometimes don't really notice that element of necessity there. So I totally agree with you on that. So thank you for that. And finally, I'll have a question for you, Rike. I know you also served as a tutor for MUN, or for your own university's MUN society, and shortly after that became the Secretary General. And now I'm someone who very, very well knows the importance of tutors, especially the individual for certain individual delegates. So I want to know a little bit about that experience. Can you tell me a little bit of how that contributed, or if that contributed to your role as a Secretary General, in terms of your communication, perhaps with the delegates, in terms of your overall position as the Secretary General? So I just want to know a little bit about that, about those connections between the two.
Yeah, I think we talked about it before, about the important skills that we all learned from being a delegate, but also for me from being a tutor, and how it helped us in fulfilling our role as Secretary General. So obviously it's this like speaking in front of people and like sticking to the timetable and like being on time and organizing all the deadlines and stuff like that I learned, and that helped me in my role as, or that do help me. I'm still like actively in the role of Secretary General, so how that helped me. But I also think that every time I participated, so I was a delegate first, then I loved it so much that I just couldn't stop and became a tutor for the seminar. And because I think every time you participate, you see something new. Like every conference I go to is a little bit different, and every time I take on a new role, it's a little different perspective, and it's a new thing that I learn. So I just feel like I want to see every angle of it, and this is why I'm like going from delegate to tutor to Secretary General. And I think like being a tutor didn't like fully prepare me for being a Secretary General. I think when I heard that the conference is coming to Erfurt, to our university, I actually applied to be assistant director, so to chair the committee. Because I didn't feel confident enough in applying for Secretary General. I felt that I could never, like I saw the call of application and I was like, oh my God, which outstanding person is going to have this amazing role? And then I was actually asked to reconsider my application and to apply as Secretary General. And I didn't feel ready for it, but I had a very supportive team, and they told me, you don't have to be ready now, but they saw the motivation that we talked about before, that I had the motivation to learn the skills that I needed in order to get there. So I mean, I'm still learning new things every day, and I think that as I said, like being a tutor didn't prepare me for being a Secretary General, but it taught me to hold on to this love that I have for Model United Nations, and to also do the like uncomfortable night shift, and to do this extra hour here and this extra hour there. And I think it's this kind of feeling, this like motivational thing, or this like dedication that I took from it, and that helps me in learning new things that lead me to becoming a Secretary General.
And I'm so glad they did. They motivated you. Both of them and you should be proud of yourselves for that role. And we look forward to seeing MUN flourish under your leadership as well in Germany. That said, that would be all of the questions from our end. We have a few questions actually from the audience who would like to address it right on the stage. An audience member who's actually a part of MUNers Across Borders as well. Lujane actually has one or two questions, I believe, who she'd like to address. Lujane, would you please join us on the stage? I believe you should be able to, because I cannot invite you. So, oh, there you are.
Hi, I've been listening to your conversation and I'm just like very enlightened, but I have like two questions, to be honest. The first being that as part of the MUN process, so you've like been engaged in like being a delegate, secretary, part of the secretariat, and now secretary generals. So which part of that process would you say was your most favorite? And if you can go back to it, which one will you choose over and over again? And the second question will be, in case you missed it out, is going to be in the chat. It's going to be like, which moment as a Secretary General made you go like, oh, why am I even doing this? And it's like, but then like later on, you just like realize, oh, that's exactly why I'm doing this. Like, I'm grateful I have the opportunity to actually like be providing these delegates such an experience.
Thanks for expressing it so vividly, both questions. Please go ahead. Shad, I think you had something to say, or no?
No, I do have something to say. Sure, I'll go first.
Yeah.
Well, I think mostly it was as I told you, we do weekly session. And the thing with MUN is that it somewhat becomes repetitive if you do it too much. So the moment I realized I have so much of a responsibility to let those people continue on till the end, because obviously the decide to leave. It's an
Shad, I think we're losing you a little bit there. Can you hear me? Are you still able to hear me? Okay, I think we lost you there for a second. So while we wait for you to come back, would Erika or Jonas, would either one of you like to address the question?
Yeah, sure. I can start. I hope that Shad is back soon. I think the first question about one of our like which position is our favorite, I'll have to go back to what I said before. I think like I cannot choose because every time I participated, there was another thing that I like discovered and another perspective I gained on the whole issue. And I think my favorite position was always the one I just had. So for now, it's going to be Secretary General. But like a couple of months ago, it would have been like being a tutor and like chairing the committee. And then, yeah, so I think it's very hard for me to choose. And I think the second question was about moments that we were like in doubt or like not understanding, or like we lost the perspective on why we started this. And I think for me, it's often when I see like when I sit on my desk and I have to do a task, and it's like a little uncomfortable task, and I see my roommate who's enjoying her free time, and I'm wondering like why, like what did I do, like which turn did I take in my life that led me to this moment where I have to sit on the table and do this task, and she can go out with a friend for coffee. Or if I'm like pulling a night shift, for example, and I'm like, I enjoy sleeping, why did I like give away up, like where did I give up my sleep just to sit here on this table and do some research or write those emails? But a couple of weeks ago, I I came to the process of preparing the conference where we had to agree on the topics for the different committees. And that was like a massive research task. And I knew it was going to be a massive research task. And it was like right at the end of my exam period. So I was technically not looking forward to another massive research task. But the moment I started and I just opened up those like billion tabs with the UN logos, and I just had this moment and I was like, this is nice. I had to write 3 essays and I did not enjoy them as much as I just enjoyed this 10-hour research just to agree on one topic. So that was a very nice like realizational moment, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing those topics I decided on discussed on the stages.
Which is an experience I can relate to very, very well. Having the same week for deadlines, both for school and for MUN, and the MUN deadline being so much more motivating and fun than the school deadline itself. I can definitely feel you in that experience. Since we have you back, Shahad, would you like to go back to the question? Can you hear me clearly now?
Yeah, I can hear you clearly. I thought I was talking, and then I don't know what happened.
Sorry,
How much did you hear of my answers?
Please go ahead.
Yeah, it was. So did you hear any of my answer?
We could hear the very beginning of your answer, but not most of it. Just like the first few sentences.
I was so worried that I interrupted you, Riki. I'm really sorry if I interrupted you.
Perfect.
It was just connection problems, and okay. Well, the moment I realized that it was just, why did I do this and why did I agree to this, was when I realized how much of a responsibility it was to keep people engaged. So as I said, during the season, we have weekly sessions. It's not just one thing that they look forward to. And when you have one thing that they look forward to, it's very easy to keep them engaged. They're just waiting. But when it's a weekly or maybe a bi-weekly thing, they start to lose interest. I've done so much research. I keep getting those research tasks every single week. And after a while, I don't want to do this anymore. And it's very normal for students to leave student activities. It's integral, actually. It's part of being in a student activity that you will have to experience some people leaving. But I was so worried that some people would leave out of boredom. But then whenever I come to realize that there are people that are actually improving and there are people whose skills are becoming better, I realize, hey, this is actually fun. And whenever I go as a guest, maybe I attend a session, I realize how much I love the idea of MUN still, even though it does cause me so much stress nowadays. I still really enjoy it, and I love being there, and I love seeing people who will take my place and see people who will take my position. And it makes me realize that, hey, it's worth it. Maybe it's a bit stressful that I have to make sure that they're constantly engaged, but that responsibility doesn't fall on my shoulders alone. And in the end, it is a wonderful experience that I'm very glad I'm part of.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those insights. And Jonas, finally off to you, please.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so for me, just to answer the first question, of course, being Secretary General, I think it would be bad for me to say that, I do, and this is not my favorite position. So yes, of course, I love being Secretary General, mostly because you get to realize the vision of the conference, which you've been dreaming of since you were a delegate. When you say, okay, I wish, when you were a delegate, you wish the conference would have gone maybe a little bit more this way or that way, and you have the chance to do it that way now. But a very close second will be Crisis Director. It's a position that I absolutely enjoy, and well, there's nothing to it. It's just the nature of it all. And I think the moment where it sometimes goes and sometimes a moment which can be really, really difficult is just well, at the end of the day, I think that being a Secretary General at the end of the day is also a little bit of a political position. Getting to this position, even though we want to sugarcoat it, we don't want to say it sometimes. Anything, not only in MUNs, anything involving organizations, including student organizations. And when it comes to leadership, it involves a lot of personal politics, office politics, so to say. And sometimes it can get very difficult. And it's also in those moments where I think to myself, well, I'm a biology student. What am I doing here? Having to argue and having to debate on these small things that don't even influence the conference at the end of the day, just a matter of balancing egos with another person there right across the table or all this sort. But it is always worth it when the conference comes around and you see the delegates there and you see how much meaning this gives the delegates. Because for us, we've done more conferences, we've done more MUN activities, we've seen it from different perspectives, but there are those first timers, and I always enjoy looking at these first timers, and they figure, oh wow, this is the first time they dress up in this formal clothing, and saying their eyes instead of we's, like referring to themselves in first personal pronouns and such. And I I always want them to experience what I experienced in my first conferences, all that joy and all, and it all becomes worth it. I think that's like the beauty that you really see at the end of every MUN conference, and you think, well, there was 6 months, 8 months, 10 months of pure suffering, really behind the scenes, working and or doing all this all. But at the end of the day, these delegates are having fun. They're gonna take this memory with them, be it they continue MUNing or not. They're gonna always look back to that time and be like, well, I went to that conference. It was really fun. We had all the best time of our lives right there, and it always makes it worth it, like all of it at the end of the day.
Definitely, it's the one memory again, because I used to talk to other people that when I was doing MUN as like a delegate and chair as well, because it extended more than I thought it would. That at the end of the day, certificates remain as like pieces of paper in your files or whatever, but then the experiences and those words that you hear, stay with you as long as you live. So totally agree with you on those points, and yeah, thank you for those insights. To conclude, Shad, Jonas, Enrique, thank you all, each and every one of you, for joining us. It was a privilege having you here at the MUNers Across Borders World Model UN Day MUN Summit 2023. I really hope we can keep in touch and have you in our future summits as well. But for this year, it was a pleasure having you here. I'm sure our audience would agree on that. So thank you for your insights, and looking forward to seeing you next year on this platform again.
Thank you also to you, Tarek, for organizing. It was a great opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks for joining. Have a lovely day.